Now, please welcome CEO at Involta, Bruce Lehrman.
Good morning, and thank you for joining the Leadership Track sponsored by Involta. Involta orchestrates IT transformation journeys using well-defined and rigorous processes to deliver hybrid cloud solutions, consulting, and data center services tailored to our clients' business drivers. We pair strategic consulting with a unique ability to leverage our owned co-location facilities and infrastructure assets to deliver highly secure and reliable solutions every day. To learn more, visit Involta.com. During this morning's sessions, feel free to throw any questions you have into the Q&A for the speakers to address. Now, allow me to introduce our speaker, Adam Carroll, co-founder at Renzo Experience. Adam Carroll is a co-founder of Renzo, a culture and leadership consultancy firm. With over 15 years of studying human behavior, interpersonal communication, and high performance, Adam assists organizations in building culture where people love to work. He is a two-time TEDx speaker with one talk amassing nearly 6 million views on YouTube and TED.com. He's the author of the Build a Bigger Life Manifesto. Please join me in welcoming Adam.
Bruce, thank you so much for the introduction. I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, welcome to the Iowa Technology Summit presented by Wellmark. And a huge thank you to Involta and Bruce for the sponsorship of this session. I'm excited to be here with you. A good friend of mine is the CTO for a large company that has around 2,000 employees. And he told me one time, Adam, our company doesn't have technology problems. We have people problems. And many of you can probably relate. So today we're going to talk about the aligned leader and how to become an aligned leader, how to create clarity and alignment at all levels of your organization. Now, before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit about Renzo and what we do. As Bruce mentioned, we are a culture consultancy. We like to help organizations and companies build a culture where people love to come to work. And we do it effectively through communication skills, doing team building exercises, strategic planning, and the like. And what we found is that many organizations have a very clear vision in January, but a very murky vision by midsummer and certainly by November or December. And so what we like to do is help create clarity and alignment among all levels within an organization, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Our firm got its name in paying homage to one of the greatest Italian architects to have ever lived, a man named Renzo Piano. We believe ourselves to be architects. And so in architecting the culture where people love to come to work, we wanted to pay tribute to this man who has designed such buildings as the Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, the Shard in London, and coincidentally, the Come and Go headquarters in downtown Des Moines. So know that what we'll talk about today is all about creating the vision for the future and for your company. We really believe in three core messages, three things. The first thing we believe is that companies improve when their people improve. And if you want bottom line results, look no further than how much you've invested in your people throughout the year. The better they get, the better the company generally does. We believe that people don't leave companies, they leave people. If you've ever left a company because of someone, as weird as this may seem, speaking out loud by yourself, maybe in your office, if you've ever left a company because of someone, say, that's me. Go ahead and do it. I hear you all. That's me, right? People don't leave companies, they leave people. And so what we want to do is help organizations understand how to better motivate, manage, lead, and communicate with the people that you have. Lastly, we believe that in most companies today, there's a leadership vacuum within the organization. And what we mean by that is that at some level of the organization, be it upper management, middle management, there is a gap. There is a weak link. There is someone who is not communicating well. And because of that, expectations go unmet, perhaps silos are created, and definitely there is tension created. So we're going to talk about how do you eliminate some of those leadership vacuums within the organization by working with those people intently. All right, let's dive in. We believe there are two most important leadership attributes within any organization. And they are, number one, understanding human behavior, and number two, communicating clarity, alignment, and purpose. And I want to break these down one at a time. Number one, understanding human behavior is really realizing that not everyone communicates like you. Not everyone makes decisions like you. Not everyone organizes their day or manages their tasks like you. And when you realize that and you can flex to someone else's style, you can better manage and lead your team. If leaders are struggling in their leadership role, what we often find is that they are not flexing at all to the people on their team, but instead remaining extremely rigid in their own social style and not being very flexible to anyone else's. Number two, we're going to talk about communicating clarity, alignment, and purpose. And you're going to hear me talk about this a lot over the next 32 minutes. Here's why. Clarity, as I mentioned, is something that's generally created when an organization lays out their mission or their vision for the year. The challenge is that we say that in our beginning of the year meeting, maybe January 1 or January 5 meeting, and then we don't really celebrate or manage to that mission or vision throughout the year more than maybe 2 or 3 times. We might have quarterly meetings where we talk about it, but generally speaking, that's maybe in the higher levels of leadership. It's not really getting pushed down to those lower levels. So we'll talk about clarity. We'll talk about alignment. Alignment is the idea that everyone is on the same bus going to the same destination. And lastly, purpose is the idea that today's workforce needs to understand why they're showing up to work. As cliched as that may sound, if people don't have a purpose to their work, they will feel unmotivated. And in the past year, we can all probably point to examples of folks who maybe kind of lost their purpose. They lost their way, so to speak, by working at home and being in a remote environment. Candidly, some people are very well designed for remote work. Okay, we know exactly who those folks are too, and that's okay. We love all types. There's no style bashing, but it's really important for many people to understand the purpose behind why they show up every single day. So I heard this quote at one point, and I'll tell you who said it to me in a moment. But this very brilliant individual told me, Adam, behavior is multifaceted, multi-causal, and multidimensional. And just to clue you in, that was my cousin Ryan, who has a PhD in psychology. Brilliant dude who told me that behavior is multifaceted, multi-causal, and multidimensional. And what he meant by that was we have no idea why people do what they do. They do it for a variety of reasons. It's multifaceted, it's multi-causal, it's multidimensional. Someone that you know who has very repetitive patterns of behavior, but all of a sudden is acting strange, we can't exactly put our finger on why they're acting differently because it's multifaceted and it's multi-causal and it's multidimensional. However, there are tendencies, there are characteristics that we can easily identify in every single person that is on our team. So as leaders, one of the things you must understand is that while behavior is multifaceted and multi-causal and multidimensional, thank you, cousin Ryan, the reality is that there are very specific tendencies that we can observe in virtually every single person on our team, and they look a little bit like this. To break this down to the most simplistic form, and you're all probably familiar with things like the Enneagram or the DISC profile or Myers-Briggs or the colors assessment. All of these are helpful in their own right. The challenge that I have with something like Myers-Briggs as an example, or the DISC profile, or the PI, predictive index, is that once you know what you are, do you really know what other people are and how to best communicate with that particular style or characteristic or personality? My general response is no. Just because you are an INFJ and I'm an ENTJ, I have no idea how to interrelate with you. I know what makes me me, I know what makes me tick, but I'm not really sure about you. So let me break this down in the most simplistic form I possibly can. I break this down in 2 categories on the XY axis. On the X axis, we have speed. And you very clearly can identify when someone is either slow or they are fast. So think about someone that you work closely with, and I just want you to imagine how you experience them. Do you experience them as slow or do you experience them as fast? And when I say slow and fast, generally I'm talking about their communication or their social style. Slow generally is less eye contact, more question asking. They're slower to make decisions. They're slow to give opinions. They want to hear yours first. That would be slow. Fast, make decisions quickly. They have gut feelings. They're quick to share opinions. They have lots of eye contact, sometimes like uncomfortable eye contact. You'll have those people where you're thinking, dear God, please look away. This is uncomfortable. Those folks might be experienced as fast. And then we have temperature. And the temperature is cold up at the top of the y-axis and warm down at the bottom. So again, thinking of this person that you work closely with, you've identified as either slow or fast. Now I want you to identify them as either cold or warm. And when we break these down, what we find is that folks who are slow and warm generally are very team-oriented. So when you meet someone slow and warm, generally speaking, they're going to ask lots of questions about you and your family and what happened this weekend. They want to defer to someone else's story before sharing their own. So someone on your team that is slow and warm, they're very much team-oriented. It's consensus. They want everyone to feel good, et cetera, et cetera. Someone who is cold and slow. Now, I will tell you this. I meet a lot of people, particularly in IT, not painting with a broad brush, but I do meet a lot of folks in IT who I will experience as cold and slow. And many of them will say, I don't want to be cold and slow. It's not a bad thing. Folks who are cold and slow generally are very data-oriented. So when you are leading someone who is very data-oriented, they will ask a lot of questions that start with the word why. They will say, why are we doing it this way? And why is this a priority? And why is this happening before this is happening? And it will feel like it's an affront, but actually what they're doing is they're collecting all sorts of data and information in order to make the best possible decision. So you've got cold and slow folks that are very data-oriented. That changes how we interact with them. Going around the corner to a couple of the others, folks who are warm and fast are very idea-centric. They love ideas. Just ask them. They have a million of them. Folks who are idea-oriented have lots on their plate. They're loose cannons. They might be seen as somewhat disorganized, but they're very, very good at seeing the big picture. So if you have someone that is warm and fast on your team, ideally the way you want to be leveraging them is by talking about strategy and big picture ideas. You want them selling ideas to other departments, but they're very, very talented at what they do. The only challenge to this group, the warm and fast group, actually there are two challenges. The first challenge is this. When they are in conflict, they will attack and confront. When they're in conflict, they will attack. Here's the other challenge. They really like to ideate and brainstorm over margaritas or happy hour beers, right? So that can only be challenging because we can get completely off the rails with this group, have a lot of fun, but we need one group to bring us back, and it is this group up here, the cold and fast folks. They're very task-centric. So when you experience someone as cold and fast, know that what they think about, their core orientation on a daily basis is their to-do list. What do I need to get done every single morning, first things first? It is business first and then social, whereas down below the line, it's social first and then business. Now, already I'm sure you can begin to delineate some of the folks on your team and where they fall in each one of these quadrants. That in itself is very helpful because then you know that someone who is cold and fast, very task-oriented, emails to them should be brief, bullet pointed. If you can fit everything in the subject line, even better. Okay, they don't want to read a long email. They just want to know the facts. In the cold and slow category, data-oriented folks, they need a fair amount of detail. The emails to them might be paragraphs. It likely will be bullet points of all the pertinent information. Folks in the slow and warm category, emails to them will often start with a platitude. Hey, how are you? Good morning. How was your weekend? Right? And the idea folks, same thing. We want to ask them about themselves, but they would much rather have this conversation in person. As we lead each of these team members, it's going to shift and change how we are with each one of them. Now, that may seem like a lot, but in all reality, it's not. Once you understand this, it will become second nature. The reality for most leaders is, particularly if they are cold and fast, they're very task-oriented, they are about 25% effective in their communication style. They're 75% ineffective because only about 25% of their workforce also falls in the cold and fast upper right-hand quadrant. So what we must do is learn to flex as leaders. And when we flex, and we'll talk more about how we do all those things, we talk about providing clarity, alignment, and purpose with our teams. Clarity, alignment, purpose are our buzzwords at Renzo. And in fact, one of the things that we encourage companies to have on the regular are CAP meetings. CAP is clarity, alignment, and purpose meetings, where we sit down and we say, are we all clear? Are we all aligned? And does everyone know what their purpose is in the mission? And when we do this on a regular basis, what it does is it creates a unified front. We're all going in the same direction. Or as Patrick Lencioni wrote about in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, when everyone can be rowing in the same direction at the same time, and an organization can dominate any industry against any competition at any time. Our goal, candidly today in the next 20 minutes, is to help you get to a point where you're getting everyone rowing in the same direction at the same time on your team. Here's how we do this. First of all, there's 3 questions that we must answer for our team. And as simplistic as these may sound, we find that this metaphor works really, really well within organizations. So the 3 questions are these. Number 1 is, where is the bus going? Where is the bus going? And the metaphor that we use at organizations far and wide, we tell them, hey, this bus is going to San Diego. And when we get to San Diego, we're going to have a lot of fun. San Diego is a great town. There are beaches, there's great restaurants, tons of live music. It is a great place. Sunny, 320 days out of the year. You'll love it. But we are all going to San Diego, make no mistake. That's where is the bus going. Secondly, the question we must answer for our teams is, are we all on the same bus? Meaning, are we aligned on expectations? And in many organizations, what we find is that when we say, hey, what's the core vision for the company? And in a room of 10 people, we'll get 8 different answers. 2 people might be aligned, but 8 people are not. It would be like getting on a bus and saying, we're all going to San Diego, and half the bus saying, yay, I love San Francisco, and the other group saying, I love San Antonio. This is going to be so much fun. Know that right now on your team, you have people on your bus to San Diego that believe they're going to San Antonio or San Francisco. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them wrong. It just means they're out of alignment. And what we either need to do is bring them back into alignment of where we're going or have them find another bus. One of the very, very hard conversations we have when we start working with organizations is this. Our goal when we start working with a team and we're initiating some big initiative, we're going to install it in an organization, we tell them there will be people who will not be along for the ride. And our goal is to either help them out or to help them out. That's it. We either want to help them out or we want to help them out. It doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them wrong. It just means they're not a fit. They're not on the right bus. And so in every team, there's a hard conversation to have. Here's where the bus is going. Are we all aligned on that? Are all of our expectations in the same spot? Last question is this. What is my purpose? As a leader, it may be up to you to define the purpose for your team. And as a leader, one of the things that requires is you have a good conversation and understanding and knowledge of each team member. In a virtual environment, that may be kind of difficult. In a few moments, I'm going to give you a strategy or a tactic that you can use to build more awareness with your teammates, to stay connected. Even if you're in a remote work environment, one of the things that we found is that those remote work environments, while they're great for getting stuff done, they're terrible for continuing culture. And so our goal in the midst of quarantine and the changing environment that we find ourselves in, where some people are going back full time, some are not, we have half hybrid, half not, we have to figure out a way to really maintain a cohesive, unified culture. And the way to do that is to help people understand what their purpose is when they come to work. What value do they bring? Know this, the work that your team is doing, for some people, it's energy. It's life-giving. They love it. They would do it even if you didn't pay them, right? I say that all the time. I would speak for a living for free. I just have this thing called a family that has this nasty habit of eating 3 times a day. And so we all have to make money, right? So people who would do the work for free, what they're doing gives them energy. But then there's another group. And when they go to work every day, the work that they do is actually just stuff. And so our goal, again, as leaders, is to help orient people to what brings you energy and what is stuff. Now, a good friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Mitch Matthews, whom some of you may know, Mitch has this saying. He says, in every job, even a dream job, there is a 20% suck factor, right? And what that means is 80% is going to be awesome and 20% is just flat out going to suck. And we got to get through that. But our goal, again, as leaders is to figure out what gives people energy and what is stuff to them and drive them more towards energy because, again, that's value. So let me break these down one by one. When we talk about clarity, I found this great image, and the image was of the Golden Gate Bridge in early 2020 and late 2020. And I maintain this is a perfect graphic representation of what happened in the year 2020 and candidly what happens in almost every single year within business. In early 2020, our visions were very clear. I remember going back and reading my vision for 2020, and I was getting ready to hit home runs every single month. And then I look back in August and September, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, I had that plan. It didn't really turn out the way that any of us had hoped, I don't think. And so what happened in early 2020, someone took this photo at the Golden Gate Bridge in January. Beautiful clear skies. You can see all the way through to the other side of the bridge. But in late 2020, in September and October, if you recall, in Northern California, the wildfires were burning and there was smoke and soot in the air. And it had caused an untenable situation for a lot of people in Northern California. This was what they were seeing. It was no longer clear. It was a lack of clarity. I maintain this happens in businesses every single year, every single month, and sometimes every single week. On Monday, the plan is very clear. By Friday, there was a lack of clarity amongst the team because maybe it was clear, but there's a lack of alignment. And we'll talk more about that. Your goal as a leader right now is to make sure that your team is very, very clear on what the mission and the vision is all about. We want to get back to the image on the left side. When I ask organizations, does your team know where the company is going or your department is going? The leaders of those teams or departments will tell me, of course they do. We had a meeting on January 5th. We told them all where we were going. And then we get a group in a room for a Q2 or Q3 planning meeting. We'll say, okay, everyone, where is the company going? And I get as many different answers as there are people in the room. And we'll look to the leaders and say, it was clear for a while. And then life kicked in and it became unclear again. And so as a leader, one of the takeaways for all of you today is this. Though you may believe your team is entirely clear, it is crystal clear where they're headed in your mind. In theirs, it may not be. And we have to reiterate it and reinforce it on a regular basis, or else we'll go off in a different direction. So maintain clarity. That's number one. Number two, let's talk about alignment. Alignment is a really big deal, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this and give you some strategies on how to do this. Also, tell you a quick story, which you may appreciate and probably resonate with just a little bit. Alignment is making sure that we are all on the same bus and the expectations are the same. So here's what this looks like, regular check-ins for alignment. I mentioned that at Renzo, we hold CAP meetings, clarity, alignment, and purpose meetings. The main point of discussion when we get on those calls is, are we all aligned on where we're headed? And if we are out of alignment at any stage of the game, we will recorrect that vision and make sure we're aligned by the time we leave the call. Those regular check-ins need to happen, as the bullet suggests, on a regular basis. And this may be a challenge for a lot of people. Many of you are probably leading massive, massive teams. Maybe you're in an agile environment where you're doing alignment checks daily, maybe twice a day, which is awesome. But for some of you, you're leading a team that's virtual. They're remote. They're in every corner of the world. We still need to have regular check-ins for alignment. And that's not just as a team, but also individually, to make sure that individually they're very aligned. Because here's what happens. I talked about understanding the different styles, the different communication or social styles. Someone who is cold and slow, who's very data-oriented, very information-centric, when they are under pressure or when there is stress in their environment, they will avoid and withdraw. So you could be on a meeting and say, is everyone aligned? And someone who is, you experience them as cold and slow, we might call them analytical. They will avoid and withdraw from the conversation. They won't share what needs to happen or the fact that they don't feel there's alignment. Someone who's in the opposite category, who is warm and fast, the idea-oriented person, what we would call expressive, under stress, in conflict, when there's tension, they will attack and confront. And when they attack and confront, that analytical in the opposite quadrant up here, they will shut down even more. So what we have to understand when we do regular check-ins for alignment is checking in individually with every single person in our team. And I'll talk about how to do that in a really effective, fast way. One of the things you can do immediately in your organization is use what we call direct model feedback. And direct model feedback looks like this. At the end of every meeting, and I mean every meeting, one-on-ones, team builds, it could be a sales call, it could be a meeting with your supervisor leading up the chain. At the end of every single meeting, you could say this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did we do? How would you rate this meeting on a scale of 1 to 10? You could ask them, what went right in this meeting? What didn't go so well? What might we do differently next time in order to make sure that we get the best use of time? This is direct model feedback. And a couple things happen when you start implementing this on a regular basis within your organization. Number one, people feel compelled to find ways to improve the process. We, and I borrowed this from Tony Robbins, call it CANI, C-A-N-I. It stands for constant and never-ending improvement. When you have an organization that focuses on CANIing every meeting, constant and never-ending improvement, you're asking questions like, what went well? What didn't go well? What could we do differently? And the answers that will come up may be things like, you know what we need? We need a timer because Bill isn't expressive and he talked 38 minutes of our 45-minute meeting. Sorry, Bill, no offense, right? When that stuff comes up, then we know how to adjust and make the meeting just a little bit better. So use direct model feedback. On a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing as your leader? And I really, truly want the feedback. We call it fearless feedback. And when you're willing to ask for fearless feedback, you can get all manner of feedback from all manner of people. Imagine asking your children at the end of a week, hey kids, how was I as a dad or a mom on a scale of 1 to 10 this week? And you'll probably get really honest answers. Like my one son who gives me a 9.9 every time, particularly if I buy him candy during the week. Some of you know that son. Or you'll get a really candid answer from maybe your spouse. Oh, you were a 6, to be quite honest. Why was I a 6? Well, you load the dishwasher wrong this week. Okay, that was mine anyway. But now I know, and I've now corrected my faulty behaviors around loading the dishwasher. Use direct model feedback is what I'm saying. Let's move on. I want you to leverage shared ownership. And this is a very, very big deal, particularly among teams. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story that illustrates what shared ownership is and why it's so important. One day, my son came storming through the back door. He was about 8 years old. He was soon to turn 9. And he came storming in through the back door. He slammed the back door, stomped his way up the stairs to his bedroom, and slammed the door. And I walked out of my office and I went to my wife and I said, what is his deal? And she said, he's mad. He was mad in the car. We just got home. He was mad because he was talking about all of the things that he was going to be able to get at his birthday party. And we were taking he and about 6 other boys down to the Des Moines G League basketball game down at Wells Fargo Arena. And again, this was a few years ago. So he said, we're going to get candy and popcorn and pizza and Dippin' Dots and everything else. And my wife said, no, we're having pizza at home and cake. And then you and your friends are going to go down to Wells. And he was very frustrated about that. Now we're still working on reactions. Okay. So don't judge me. He's doing much better. But at the time, I was a little frustrated by his reaction as well. And right about then, my father called on the phone, and my dad worked for UC Berkeley in Northern California. He was an organizational development consultant there, and he's always working on some strategies. And he said, hey, are any of the kids home? I'd like to talk to them. And I said, only one, Davis, is home, but I don't think he's in any state to talk to you, Dad. And he said, why? And I told him the story. And then he said those magic dad words, do you mind if I ask you a question? Right? And I know that whenever my dad says that, he's going to drop some magical dad knowledge on me, right? And you can all do this as leaders. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Or do you mind if I provide you some feedback? That's asking for permission. So when my dad says, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I say, sure. He can virtually say anything and I won't be offended by it because I know he's just offering and I accept it. Here's what he said. Adam, did Davis have any information about a budget for the party? Did he know how much there was to be spent on pizza or how many boys could come and still get candy and pop and whatnot at Wells Fargo? And I said, no, he had no information. And he said, did Davis have any decision-making ability? Did he get to decide how much would be spent on pizza versus something down at Wells Fargo, or a cake there versus candy down at the arena? And I said, no, he didn't have any decision-making ability. And he said, well, then what it sounds like is he didn't have any information and he didn't have any decision-making ability, but he's dealing with all the consequences. Now, let me put this back on you all. How many times is a decision made on high? It is then forced down through the layers of the organization for the people at the ground level to execute. And they're looking back up like all the rubber ducks in this line. They're all looking up the chain like, who made this foolhardy decision? And it doesn't work. This is why initiatives don't work in companies. If this sounds at all vaguely similar to your organization, the reason that cultures break down is there was never shared ownership to begin with. It was a decision that was made on high and it was pushed down to everybody down below. If we want to create initiatives that work within organizations, then what we must do is we must seek information from every party. Now, there's a big difference between decision-making and input, and we can tell them. There is a core group that will make the decisions, but we value your input, so you do have some say in decision-making. The final decision is ours. Let's define that first of all, because you all know this. There are people in your meetings who believe they're making decisions when really they're just offering input. Can I get an amen? Go ahead and say it out loud. Amen. Yes. And last but not least, understand what the consequences are across the board when these decisions are made. If you're doing a new implementation, one of our clients did a gigantic Salesforce implementation recently. And I asked them, what were the consequences up and down the chain? And did you map them out before you did the implementation? He said, candidly, we didn't. We did it about midstream, but we're glad we caught it because we made some adjustments in our process when we understood the consequences. What I encourage you all to do is this: leverage shared ownership within the organization by seeking information, helping in the decision-making process from lots of different parties, and then understanding the consequences across the board as you go along. Shared ownership works. It works in families. It works within organizations. It works in partnerships. It's really, really important to understand. It creates alignment. I heard this comment one time: uncommunicated expectations are just pre-planned resentments. Uncommunicated expectations are just pre-planned resentments. And I'm pretty sure it was a very wise marriage therapist who said this at one point. Okay, here's why this is important to understand. You all probably have some expectations of your team. Here's the vision, here's the mission, let's go get them, team. And there are some uncommunicated expectations of when people are going to execute, how they're going to execute, what the response plan is going to be. There are some assumptions made, maybe even some expectations of the team, but when they're not communicated, what it does is it creates resentment on the back end. Another great example at the home level: you leave in the morning fully expecting your children to empty a clean dishwasher and reload it with dirty dishes. And when you get home, you're resentful that they didn't do it. So instead, the way that might look is right before you leave the house, you say, kids, here's my expectation. That dishwasher is clean. I need all the clean dishes put away, all the dirty dishes on top of the counter put into the dishwasher. I would like this done by the time your mother and I get home. This might be a conversation we have. Now, I'm not saying it works every time, but I will say this: when I come home and I say dishwasher, they jump to immediately because they know that was an expectation and they've missed it. But I don't have the resentment because I had a communicated expectation on the front end. This is all about alignment. Now, again, all of these things may seem very, very simple, but trust me in that they are not simplistic in how well they work, how much efficiency and effectiveness there is at the organizational level when you do these things really, really well. We teach something called the 3x3, which is basically this. First, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you in detail. Then I'm going to tell you what I told you. This is how we communicate expectations. And as simple as it is, it works every single time. So this is a little bit of how we do it. We do these through check-ins. We do these through huddles. We help people recommit to the values, both of the organization and personally. And we have a high level of empathy. Now, for some of you leaders, again, that have big teams and maybe they're very spread out, you're thinking to yourself, I don't have time to have all these conversations with people. So let me give you just a very, very simple formula to follow to have conversations with your team to get the most out of even a 5 to 7 minute conversation. So as an example, I might call Bruce and I have 5 or 7 minutes and I say, Bruce, I apologize. I only have 5 or 7 minutes before my very next call, but I want to know, how are you doing? We call this a heat meeting, by the way. How are you doing, Bruce? And Bruce is going to answer like anyone would, particularly in the Midwest. Fine, good, great. You know, they'll say fine as frog's hair, or if I were any better, I'd have to be medicated or something like that, right? And then you go, how are you really doing? And in the midst of 2020, some of them might have said, this new puppy is killing me. Or they might have said, all of us working under the same roof doesn't work. I can't get anything done during the day. I'm answering emails at night, or I'm super stressed. They're going to open up. And then you go, well, tell me some of your expectations for this week. What do you expect of me? What can I expect of you? Have an expectations conversation. This is accountability and alignment. Then we go to A, appreciation, acknowledgement, accountability. Hey, one of the things I want to tell you, Bruce, I really want to acknowledge you for stepping up in that meeting. I appreciated that you shared your thoughts at a time when it probably was uncomfortable to do so. I just want to let you know I acknowledge you for that. I appreciate you. And then last, hey, together we'll get through this. We have this big installment. The implementation happens next week. We'll do it together, right? I got to bail on this call, but I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. And if you need me, reach out. This is a heat meeting. Can be done personally, can be done over the phone. It can be done via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. You can do it with your families. Have a heat meeting with your kids at night. How are you? How are you really? Hey, what do you expect to happen this weekend? I just want to acknowledge you for what you said to your brother yesterday. It was super kind of you. And hey, together, we're going to get through all this. We use this all the time in our meetings with individuals. Last but not least, in the last minute here, what is my purpose or what value do I or we bring? Make sure that your team knows the value and the purpose they have as they show up every day. And the way you do that is say, hey, you really matter here. What you're doing here makes a difference, and here are all the ways it makes a difference. I always love to leave audiences with takeaways, so here they are. Number one, I want you to create clarity through vision setting and sharing that vision regularly. It could be weekly, could be by the month, but I want you to share the vision on the regular. Number two, to enhance alignment, use things like shared ownership, information, decision-making, consequence, and define your expectations. And then last, just remind your team of their purpose and what purpose they're playing on the team, how valuable they are. Make sure they know. Believe it or not, a vast majority of people have received no recognition or appreciation in the last year in many companies out there. And so call them out. The lack of negative feedback is not positive feedback, right? So let's give folks some positive feedback along the way. Last but not least, I'm going to skip this one just for time's sake. We believe that to be an aligned leader, all of these bullets must be met. And if you'd like to stay connected, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn, Adam Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's, or at acarroll@renzoexperience.com. With that, our time is up. Bruce, I'm going to call you back in. We're going to see if there's any questions that I might be able to answer or have a dialogue with you.
No, absolutely. It was what a fantastic message. And I think everybody in the audience has, probably like me, took a lot of notes and have a lot of things that you can remind yourself every day to do to be a better leader and a better part of a team. So we did have some great questions come in from the audience. So I'm going to read them verbatim and hopefully, we'll get some good answers out of this. So first one is, if you love what you do and don't want to leave the company, How do you recommend combating the people that make leaving an option? And I think it came up during the people don't leave companies, they leave people section.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I maintain that the challenge for many organizations when that is the situation that's presented is there is constant tension, but there's rarely productive conflict. And there's a big difference between the two. Tension exists, tension just sits there and it continues to fester and build. And we've all probably been in an organization or in a situation where we can literally feel the palpable tension between two parties or two departments, candidly, or various organizations. But there's not productive conflict, and that we can't just say, hey, I'm having an issue with this. Let's talk about this and get it out of the way. And one of those things that we might talk about is I'm just feeling like my ideas aren't listened to, or I feel like when we come to these meetings, there's a group of us that are ignored or avoided. Candidly, Bruce, one of the ways that Renzo works with organizations is we help people understand what those styles are: warm and fast, cold and slow, all of those. And when you understand them, it's a lot easier to understand why not someone rubs me the wrong way, but why that style rubs me the wrong way. And there's a big distinction between that. Many of us have been in situations where we're like, I don't know, that person is just, they rub me the wrong way. And then that cloud hangs over that person. In reality, it's that person's style. And so to make the situation more palatable, I think one of the things that an organization can do is really study styles, study habit patterns and behavior and communication.
Yeah, so I guess just as a follow-on question, when people come back to the organization, they say, well, this person's leaving the organization because they were offered more money or they have a better work from home policy. I think what you're saying is, maybe you just need to look at what your leadership style or.
I think so. I think certainly digging into, as a leader, if you're about to lose someone that's a valuable member of your team, and they're telling you it's for money or it's for schedule or it's for some other reason, but deep down they were a really good cultural fit and they're a great employee, and for all intents and purposes they fit well within the team, I would ask them for their very candid, fearless feedback about what could I have done differently, or what did the company need to do differently to keep you? Because you all know it's an exceptionally expensive proposition losing someone and trying to replace that human capital. And so by all means, get as much feedback as you can about what would need to change to keep them, and take it to heart, because there may be other people following close behind.
Absolutely. Great feedback. So another question we ended up with, so during your talk about the different types of personality types, the warm, cold, fast, slow, this question came up. What about people who are in the middle of a line? For example, they're fast and data, they're tasked with hints of team. How do you deal? I mean, because obviously there's most people don't fit like perfectly in the quadrant. So how do you deal with these people on the line and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the reality is there is a quadrant within each quadrant. So you could be on the far upper left side of one quadrant or the far right side of another. In reality, if you find yourself maybe challenged to determine which quadrant you fall upon, you probably flex very well. You flex to other styles effectively. And the best leaders out there are the ones who do flex from one style to another. So if you are prone to being very task driven, but yet you can sit back with someone who's maybe a little more personable and more focused on the relationship, more emotive, and you can downshift a bit and actually relax into a conversation with them, you're doing a great job of flexing to their style. Some of the best leaders that I've ever met are folks that you would have no idea what their style is, because they easily and seamlessly go from one style to the next, depending on whom they're talking to or who they're in the room with. So yeah, that's my response to that, Bruce, is if you are straddling a line, you likely exist in two quadrants at the same time, and you can fit very easily between them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, you see people kind of move back and forth naturally anyway, from being really dominant in one area to moving around a little bit in each one of those, and it's just a really a guideline to help people understand that there are the personality types, right?
Exactly. It's not hard and fast. Some people will read a personality profile and say, well, this is my personality, take me or leave me. The social style are more habits or patterns of behavior. And when we can identify those and just shift, sometimes even on a minute level to what that person needs, you'll get great results. And I use the email example in the presentation, but imagine if you sent a 5-paragraph long email to someone who is a driver, who's very driven, to-do list oriented. It's TLDR, right? Too long, didn't read. It's too much detail. Just give me what you need. I'll figure it out. And that may be offensive to someone else, but when we understand, what that other person's needs are, we can communicate accordingly.
That's right. That's great. Great feedback. This came up when we talked about the direct model feedback, and the question is, how do you propose direct model feedback to your leader or boss if they're not already kind of engaged in that style of leadership?
Yeah. We worked with an organization that had 4,000 employees, and the basically the CEO level role at this organization was the former Rear Admiral in the Navy. And his entire MO was, if I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. And so, as you might imagine, all of the ideas and feedback got pushed down because no one was really willing to speak up, to step up. And they took on a new leader, a new CEO role. And the person who occupied that seat came in and said, I want to change the entire culture of the organization where feedback is actually celebrated. There's so many great ideas that are just languishing within the organization. So to answer your question, Bruce, one of the things that I think you could do is to present or promote an idea to your leader or to senior management and say, I think there are a lot of ideas that are bubbling and percolating within the company. What would you think if we suggested maybe doing feedback on a daily basis in our meetings to begin to promote fearless feedback all the time? Because the reality is, if your culture does not have feedback bubbling up perpetually, then you've naturally created an environment where feedback is not accepted, or it's not acted upon, or it's not appreciated. One of the things that we often tell companies is your business is perfectly engineered for the results it's currently getting. And I'll say it again because it's really important. Your business or your department, you can fill in anything, your family, your finances, is perfectly engineered for the results that you're currently getting. So if you're not getting feedback right now, we have to re-engineer what's happening in the meetings to make sure that feedback bubbles up. So anytime it's like, well, why isn't this happening? Clearly, the organization's engineered so that happens or doesn't happen, as the case may be. And we just reorient how it works. So we do, in this case, celebrate feedback.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I completely agree. So this one, you can start with an apology because they came in a little bit late. So they did miss a little bit of the early part where you did talk about regular cadence of meetings. But the question is, how important is having a regular cadence agenda of reviewing team goals, making hits and misses, commitment visible to the whole team? So I know you've addressed this a little bit, but it doesn't hurt to reiterate, that importance of that meeting cadence. And then as a follow-up to that, does this help some levels of accountability by the principal?
It absolutely does, is a short answer. Longer answer would be, there are a lot of great books on this topic out there. Two that come to mind right off the top of my head. One is a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, which is a fantastic book all about meeting cadence and how to create an entrepreneurial operating system within your business. Another great book is called The Rockefeller Habits. And this is a fantastic book by Vern Harnish. And in it, he talks about creating a one-page business plan that you go back to time and again in your meetings. As far as the cadence goes, Bruce, I maintain that a regular meeting that starts on time, ends on time, and has a very specific agenda is critical. And the reason for that is many of you probably are in departments where, we have this meeting. It happens about once a week, and we try and get it on everyone's calendar. Is there an agenda? Well, kind of. It's loose. It's kind of loosey-goosey. People bring up things to talk about. In Traction, what you'll find is there is a very specific, cadence or schedule to the agenda to the meeting. And it involves things like looking at the scorecard. What did we say we were going to do last week and what have we done? Going in and doing employee or customer headlines. Who's doing a great job in the team that we need to celebrate? What company has told us we're doing a good job? And the reason we do that is we want to celebrate more things right, not less things wrong. You know, it's kind of like training your dog to fetch a beverage from the refrigerator. You treat the dog every time it does something right. You don't scold the dog when it doesn't go grab a beverage right away. And the same is true of our teams. We have to celebrate more things right, not less things wrong. We do that in that meeting cadence. Secondly, I think part of the agenda is at the end doing that direct model feedback. How would we rate this meeting? In Traction, it's a scale of 1 to 10, and they call them level 10 meetings because our goal is to constantly strive for a level 10 in our meetings. I maintain there is no level 10. There is always room for improvement. Even if someone said, we need to reorient how this meeting is set up because there's too much fluff in the beginning and we need to get right to the meat. Cool, let's revise how the meeting operates. And we'll try that in the next meeting. The last thing I'll say on this, Bruce, in terms of meetings, cadence, having them regularly, is he or she who sets the agenda controls the meeting. And if there is no agenda, there is no one in control of the meeting. So you're going to leave going, well, cool meeting. Didn't really get anything done. I'm not sure there was any accountability there. So who owns it? And we make the distinction a lot between ownership and oversight. So there's one person that has ownership of the agenda. And then there might be someone who has oversight of the agenda who's watching the clock and saying, 12 minutes left, everybody, 12 minutes. And then what we're doing is we're creating a little bit more brevity in answers and urgency in getting the meeting done because we all agreed to get it done on time. Last little caveat, when you do that, you're saying, hey, we managed to these expectations, which creates another era of accountability.
Yeah. And we found too that having, closing the meeting with what the, decisions that were made and, next steps and tasks to be done, helps, kind of cement that as well.
For sure.
Hey, so one of the things that you mentioned, and I really like the stat, you said, even in a dream job, and 80% of your job is awesome, but you still have a 20% suck factor. Yeah. I think sometimes, and maybe this is with, maybe younger employees or what, that, they believe that, 100% of their job should be awesome or they're in a bad place. Like how do you make that kind of 80-20 rule or, hopefully it's 90-10, but, how do you make that visible and talk about that openly with employees and other leaders?
My answer is probably going to be two-part on this. Number one, I think it's about setting the expectation, particularly for some of your young teammates, that this is a big project. A lot is going to be asked of you. 80% is probably going to be awesome, and we're going to do our best to make it awesome in terms of bringing in meals, and we bought a pinball machine for the corner and whatever else you need to do to make them happy. But 20% of it's going to suck. And I just need you to get used to that know that we'll go through this period where like, this sucks. And all of us are going to say, yeah, because this is the suck factor that we're a part of right now. So I think part one is expectation setting. And part number two is we talk about at Renzo and with our clients that we always want to give our teams a reputation to live into. Not to live up to, but to live into. So we tell them, this is an amazing team. You're all unbelievably capable. We know that we're going to get this done in a week because we believe in you and we know that you're all capable. And we just keep pumping them up. We know you're capable. Give them a reputation to live into. And then the other thing that we add on is that we want to have quality on everything that sucks. And I heard this metaphor the other day, which I love, that buffaloes will run headlong into a storm and they'll be out of a storm like that. Where cows will run the opposite way from a storm and they'll be stuck in the storm for hours. The folks on your team, if they have a buffalo mentality towards challenges, they can knock those things out in no time. If they have a cow mentality, they're going to be stuck in suck factor land for a long time. So maybe posters of buffaloes all over the office, Bruce. I think that's my final answer.
No, I think that's great. And Adam, I really appreciate your time today. It was fantastic. Lots of great gems. I'm sure people can take away a lot from this session. And again, if you are interested, Renzo experience, I'm sure you would be a great person to bring into an organization if you're dealing with some of these challenges, which I think almost every company is. So again, Adam, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today.
Bruce, thank
Fantastic.
you for the sponsorship too. Appreciate you much.
Mm-hmm.